Pakistan referred to Afghanistan as its fifth province, which did not go over very well inside Afghanistan, but gave the mentality of what the Pakistani military is doing now. They wish to treat it as their fifth province. Even if they chose to invade, they could probably be in Kandahar or Kabul in 2 or 3 days. They could probably do it. The question is, what happens on day 3? Donald Trump does not think 2 or 3 moves ahead. People are always trying to think, oh, he must have a secret plan. But he gets attracted by shiny things. And for Afghanistan, Bagram, for whatever reason, is the shiny thing. The Central Asian republics pretend that Afghanistan doesn't exist. That goes all the way back to the Soviet period.
Welcome to FO Talks. With me again is Thomas Barfield. He's a professor at Boston University and an expert on Afghanistan. The last time we talked about what's going on between Afghanistan and Pakistan. A lot has happened since then. Pakistan has bombed a drug rehabilitation center in Kabul, killing more than 400 people. Pakistan says they struck a drone production unit. The Taliban administration in Afghanistan say it was, of course, a drug rehabilitation center. Thomas, what's really happening? How come Pakistan is using its military, bombing civilian areas in Afghanistan, not hitting even Taliban or striking the senior leadership of Taliban, and still getting away with it?
Well, of course, Pakistan chose to attack Afghanistan when the attention was drawn elsewhere to the war in Iran. The Taliban regime is unpopular worldwide, so didn't draw a lot of sympathy. But I think in some senses, they were hoping that this show of force would bring the Taliban to a negotiating table to them. They're concerned about the Tariq-e-Taliban attacking Pakistan. They have bases in Afghanistan, and the Pakistan army has very little leverage on Afghanistan. So one of the things that they chose to do was what they had in hand, that is to bomb Kandahar and Kabul. My guess is that they weren't particularly concerned about their targets. Kabul is a city of at least 5 million people crowded together. In some ways, it's not surprising that either the bombs were misdirected or went astray. They happened to have hit a place that was full of people. I don't think anybody believes that it was a military site.
Right.
But governments always have a tough time admitting when they were wrong. Donald Trump refuses to admit that an American Tomahawk cruise missile destroyed a school, even though the American military said, yeah, it's one of ours. Governments would be in much better position to say, we didn't mean to hit that. In fact, might help in terms of you're going to the next stage, saying that, no, we're not at war with the Afghan people, which this kind of strike certainly appeared to be.
Right. Interestingly, they've not really said that. In fact, after the airstrike, there was some pressure on Pakistan, and DGISPR, which is Director General of Inter-Services Public Relations, spoke to media, and he made some very interesting comments, and I want you to talk about those. He said that Afghanistan is not to be called the graveyard of empires, but the playground of empires, and he also spoke about how Afghans need to understand that the Taliban can't really protect them, and that the Pakistan army, the Pakistani armed forces, have the upper hand here.
Well, the problem is, speaking of playgrounds of empires, if they want to call it that, the Pakistanis are in a similar place as the British were in the 19th century, as the Soviets were in the 20th, and the Americans were in the 21st century. You can have overwhelmingly military power. The difficulty is that's not how you control Afghanistan. So it's not a question, even if they chose to invade, They could probably be in Kandahar or Kabul in 2 or 3 days. They could probably do it. The question is what happens on day 3, as practically every country that's invaded Afghanistan discovers the difficulty is not going into Afghanistan. It's how do you preserve order there? How do you get out in the aftermath? And I think Pakistan is frustrated that the Taliban are not responding to their complaints, which I think are legitimate, that they are supporting Pakistani terrorists that are attacking Afghanistan. But it's kind of rich because, after all, Pakistan for 20 years supported the Taliban mounting insurgency inside Afghanistan against both NATO and the Americans, as well as an elected Afghan government. So in some senses, they're stuck with the similar kind of thing is they lack leverage. Is that a government that is not really concerned about its people, that's highly ideological?
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan can continue bombing, and I'm sure the Taliban would say it's in God's hands.
Right. When you said a government that doesn't care about its people and it's highly ideological, one can mistake that you're talking about Pakistan also. But I want to talk about Taliban, the administration in Afghanistan. They've been in Kabul since 2021, and the normal life of an Afghan is a mess because of the Taliban. Certainly, there's a stark difference in their lives from the life before 2021 and now. And now that Pakistan is bombing Afghanistan at will, do you think the Afghans are probably questioning the Taliban and are demanding more accountability, demanding more safety? And do you think the Taliban will even care? Do they have any incentive to even listen to what fellow Afghans are saying?
They, as a theocratic regime, they do not need the consent of the governed. They have the consent of God. I don't think, and this was true in the 1990s, they really didn't concern themselves about the population in Afghanistan, and they've allowed, particularly over the past 5 years, the people of Afghanistan to suffer incredible economic hardship, all kinds of difficulties. Plus, they've been burdened by the fact that Pakistan, in a very hostile move, probably deported about 2 million so-called refugees, because many of those people were born in Pakistan, back to Afghanistan, and Iran did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So at a time of economic weakness, Afghanistan has to deal with a much enlarged population of displaced people at a time when the international community is not helping it. The one thing the Taliban have said is at least there's no war here. People aren't killing each other. We've provided stability. And for a country that's known wars since 1978, that's saying something. It's a claim to a type of legitimacy, an old type of legitimacy. The government's job is to maintain order, not to take care of its citizens. But to the extent that it looks vulnerable to Pakistani attacks, then that comes under threat. If you can't do this, what can you do? If you can't feed your people, if you can't provide medical care, how does that entitle you to be a government? The danger for, I believe, the Taliban is a concern within that their various factions would be wondering, is one of the factions or an anti-Taliban faction negotiating with Pakistan to come to power, which creates, I would imagine, a tremendous amount of paranoia in terms of how do we deal with this? Because Pakistan does have the military advantage, but Afghanistan's advantage has always been in terms of its ability to operate insurgencies within Afghanistan, but also it has the ability to sow chaos within Pakistan. That it doesn't need to send Afghans into Pakistan. It has Tariq-e-Taliban. It has leftover suicide bombers. It can cause an enormous amount of problems and to some extent cause the Pakistani people to wonder, can our government protect us? So there's sort of a tit for tat. One comes bombing from the air and the other comes from mosques being blown up, police stations being blown up. Both are highly disruptive to the governments that are supposed to prevent this, but they're entirely different types of actions. One's a direct military action, conventional warfare. and the other is a type of insurgency that Pakistan has found difficulties dealing with over the past 20, even 30 years.
Yes, and both are extremely dangerous for this region. And I want to talk. I want to talk a little bit more about the Taliban. The last time we spoke, you explained beautifully how the Taliban are not a monolith. There are factions inside the Taliban. There are even ethnic divides in the Taliban. Can you tell us more about that? Do you think if Pakistan can't muscle their way into what they want in Afghanistan, this is probably a tactic that they would be interested in, is to try and break up the Taliban on their various ideological differences and even ethnic differences?
I would think Pakistan might want to do that. The difficulty is in the past, they have put all their support by resistance groups led by Pashtuns. And the group that they want to get rid of is Pashtun. So the difficulty is they have no experience or level of trust in dealing with non-Pashtun groups.
Right.
So they've sort of painted themselves in a corner. However, if we look at, for example, the Zadrans in Kabul versus Mullah Akhundzada in Kandahar, we can see a difference between those people who are clerics and those people who are not. And the Zadrans and the others, yes, they're Taliban, but they don't come out of the clerical establishment. So one of the questions might be, is there a split there simply because going all the way back to the Soviet war, Pakistan had close relations with those people that it supported against the Soviets. Admittedly, it's generations, but they might try to revive that. Whereas their feeling might be that we thought we could control the mullahs in Kandahar, but they failed with Mullah Omar in the 1990s, and they seem to be failing now. And it's the ones in Kandahar that take the strong, that make Afghanistan an anathema to the rest of the world, particularly their policies on women, but also their lack of interest in, if you will, in regular governance. So there may well be factions within Afghanistan that say there's no reason why we certainly can't have an Islamic government. Maybe it can be an emirate, but maybe it needs to be more broad-based. You may remember that, although it was not executed, that the Trump and then / Biden policy of dealing with the Taliban argued that they should form a coalition government with the people in Kabul at the time, even though it was recognized the Taliban might be dominant. The quick collapse of the republic led to a complete Taliban victory, but in some ways that ended the opportunity for the Taliban actually to have a broader based government which could have maintained American, European, other types of aid coming in. And instead, they found themselves in charge of everything, and they lost those possibilities. But I'm sure there's some people that are open to that. It's interesting, I read in the news today that the Taliban had returned to the Americans, an American that they had imprisoned under the pressure from the Trump administration, which does seem to be kind of pro-Pakistan. And so suddenly, from the Taliban's point of view, holding Americans hostage is no longer a good card to get something. It's now a dangerous card. So get rid of them. Why did you take them in the first place? So there's some interesting patterns that are going on, which obviously some groups within the Taliban, and we don't really know, at least as an outsider, how they work. Probably some disputes about how they should approach the Pakistan problem, how they should deal with the international community, and these are unresolved. And it's a question of, I would say, that keeping an existing government that does more outreach might be a way for those in power to maintain the positions that they have without having essentially the whole country fall into anarchy again, which I don't think people want to see.
Right. And I want to talk about the United States later because they have an important role to play here. But I want to slowly zoom out and look at what's happening in the region overall. In the beginning, you mentioned that Pakistan timed the airstrikes when Iran was being hit. The international media was talking about the war in Iran. Not many spoke about the airstrike in Kabul. There was also an airstrike in Kandahar, by the way, which people have forgotten. Um, but Pakistan also did it during the month of Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan. And interestingly, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, did not condemn Pakistan openly. They did not even put out a press release regarding this. So why do you think Islamic countries, and I'm not even talking about Iran, because usually Iran is the first to send aid because they've got that border, they've got border posts in Herat, and they send truckloads of aid. Of course, they're busy, but how come the other Islamic countries are not condemning Pakistan? How come the Central Asian Republic countries, the stans, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, who've got ethnic groups in Afghanistan, there's Tajiks, there's Uzbeks, how come they're all silent?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to speak for them, but I think the Taliban regime has made itself so unpopular, even within the Islamic world, um, that I'm not even sure whether the Taliban are represented in the Organization of Islamic Countries. Because their lack of diplomatic recognition and their lack of interest in doing that outreach. In most cases, you would have a representative of your own country pushing these, or we've been hit, you should say something. My guess is the Taliban don't even think about that, right? So it made it easier for these countries to ignore what was going on. Iran was the bigger issue, but also they have more interest in not displeasing Pakistan to some way if they don't have to. The Central Asian republics pretend that Afghanistan doesn't exist. That goes all the way back to the Soviet period. The whole population's experience of living first under Tsarist rule and then under Soviet rule, they're the same ethnic groups, but they kind of look at the Afghans, even if they're co-ethnics, as almost an alien people on the other side of the border. While they sell them electricity, while there's a certain amount of trade that goes on, none of their governments has ever actually treated Afghanistan as a neighbor. They like close the closet door, there's something behind it, it doesn't exist, and maybe if we don't look in that direction, the problem will go away. Pakistan can't take that position. Iran is in an interesting position of having supported the Taliban, at least indirectly, providing trade. But one of the problems that Pakistan has, it wants to see itself as an important country, interlocutor with Iran, but it also has a defense alliance with Saudi Arabia. And there was a recent report in the New York Times today that Saudi Arabia was actually encouraging Trump to continue the war, to finish it. That's going to put Pakistan in a very difficult position because it's got an alliance on the one hand with the Saudis, but on the other hand, it's a neighbor of Iran. So in some ways, as this other things are happening, Afghanistan is a side issue for the world. And again, you don't have anybody inside Afghanistan within the Taliban capable of making the case that we're a sovereign nation. We have been bombed from there. We have been violated, and by a fellow Islamic state, and during Ramadan. It's like it shows in some ways the contempt that Afghanistan has in Pakistani eyes that you can do this. They treat them like wayward subjects rather than a sovereign state.
Right. And as far as I remember, only Russia officially recognizes the Taliban administration. Do you think there would have been more outrage in the world if other countries officially recognized Taliban? Do you think that's something that should be happening?
Well, yes, because that lack of recognition has also cut off international aid, but it's also meant that the Taliban don't even staff their own embassies in most of these countries. They don't have representatives. To my knowledge, they do not have the UN seat. You need representatives on these international commissions at the UN to to bring, if they had a representative at the UN, they could be bringing this before the Security Council. But if you're not even represented, then nobody wants to create a problem they don't have to deal with. And it's a problem of the Taliban regime so isolating itself and unwilling to make compromises that would really open it up to the world, and compromises that the policies that are being asked for changes, like on women's rights and others, are hardly radical. Saudi Arabia is doing more. Iran may be an Islamic republic, but women are a major part of their economy. The Afghans are worse than reactionary under the Taliban, and even saying women can't work, they can't be educated. There's not a single Islamic country that shares that attitude with the Taliban. So natural allies, as well as former patrons of the old government in the West, have essentially just cut them off. And most other governments would be feeling we need to do something about this. But the Taliban have taken the attitude, we don't need to worry about this.
Thomas, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is undoubtedly the United States. They've been in this region, they've engaged with Pakistan, they've been in Afghanistan for about the last 3 decades, possibly even more. I would say since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And we now see the United States making a severe tilt towards Pakistan under the Trump administration. In fact, Pakistan has opened doors to diplomacy given the war in Iran. They're hosting a delegation from the United States and Iran to discuss what's happening in the region. One of the things that the United States has been after, especially the Trump administration has been after, is the Bagram air base. And several Pakistani generals have openly said that they're willing to work with the United States on getting this. Tell us about this mercurial friendship, this relationship that the United States and Pakistan have shared in the last 3 to 4 decades.
Well, Pakistan has invested a lot in its relationship with the United States, and that's quite old. People may remember that when Bangladesh broke away from West Pakistan, the Americans under Henry Kissinger did that tilt towards Pakistan.
Right.
So it's quite old, and unlike Afghans, Pakistan military for generations has been sending its officers to American military academies, to exchange programs. It has cultivated that relationship. In Washington, its ambassadors work very hard to try to get Pakistan's point of view across to officials in Washington. And it's something the Afghans never did. But in this case, I think what we're looking at, we're also dealing in the United States with a very mercurial president who works on his own personality, and the Pakistanis have realized, yeah, let's nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. I would argue most countries have more respect for themselves than to do something like that. When the Americans saw him taking the Nobel Prize from the Venezuelan who it was given to, what kind of ego does that show? That you didn't even get it, but, I'll take it home anyway. Anyway, Pakistan has played very well on this, but to even talk about giving Bagram, that they could help in getting Bagram back, if Bagram was in, let's say, the Punjab, I would say maybe that would be a possibility. It's not their country. What do they mean, giving Bagram back? It's an air base in another sovereign country. The only way they could do that would be if they controlled the country, or a regime that was Pakistani-backed controlled the country and did it. So in some sense, they're blowing smoke. Number one, they have a horrible relationship with the Taliban. So you'd have better luck getting Bagram back from the Taliban in exchange for some large payment than you would between going back to have Pakistan do it. But it goes back During the last Taliban period in the 90s with Mullah Omar, Pakistan referred to Afghanistan as its fifth province,
Hmm.
which did not go over very well inside Afghanistan, but gave the mentality of what the Pakistani military is doing now. They wish to treat it as their fifth province. And that's a form of arrogance that is likely to blow up in your face. All right? Because the most powerful countries in the world have thought this is a place we can make do whatever we want. And 4 times in 175 years, they've all failed. And these were the superpowers of their age that had not only the strongest militaries, but had the strongest economies. Pakistan may have a strong military, but does this have the economy to finance the reconstruction of Afghanistan? Does it have the close relationship with its Afghan people after expelling 2 million of them back? As I see it, this is a form of imperial hubris, which tends to backfire on the imperialist, whoever happens to fill that slot. And so I would say that particularly when Pakistan says it can deliver anything in Afghanistan to the United States, number one, the United States certainly shouldn't believe it. But number two, that's probably the wrong course to make if you're trying to come to an agreement with a country that is harboring an insurgency against you, that you cannot eradicate without their cooperation.
Okay, so what is Washington's game plan here then? I mean, everyone remembers the retreat that the United States had to face in 2021, and then Donald Trump comes back to the White House, and now he's again demanding Bagram. Is he bluffing, or do you think he's somewhere down the line serious about American presence back in Afghanistan?
Well, he wants Greenland first. All right. The guy has never seen a place on a map he doesn't want. All right. Um, does he even know where Bagram is? All right. My guess would be no. Does he know what it is? He can't. He's a former real estate developer, and somebody's told him it's a key piece of property. It'd be really good. But I don't think he's even aware that Afghanistan is like a landlocked nation. It's like even if Donald Trump does not think 2 or 3 moves ahead. People are always trying to think, oh, he must have a secret plan. But he gets attracted by shiny things. And for Afghanistan, Bagram, for whatever reason, is the shiny thing. But he's also almost destroyed NATO by his obsession over Greenland.
Hmm.
So this merely falls into a bag of other things that drive Trump foreign policy that I'd have to say you need to separate out from, if you will, American long-term policy. Because it only makes sense in terms of the person at the top who doesn't like to take advice, who I'm not really sure. There's no golf courses in Afghanistan, so there's nothing to build there. There's no Trump Tower in Afghanistan. So, yeah, I think one of the problems is, even if you look at the Iran war, the American military is quite confident will do what the commander-in-chief says. But that's the fact that the commander-in-chief and his staff are ill-informed and are mistake-prone. I think that falls in that category. But it's at the outer reaches of the things that interest him. So it's not particularly important for American foreign policy, or even for Afghanistan relationships.
Thomas, the last time we spoke, you extensively explained about Pakistan's game plan in Afghanistan. Very quickly, before we go, what is Taliban's strategy? Are they just going month to month, hoping that the Afghans don't revolt against them? Do you think they have like a larger game plan of ensuring that Afghanistan as a country comes back up? There's some economic activity, there's some kind of governance, and of course, some kind of safety for the ordinary Afghan.
No, I don't think that. I think they are concerned with maintaining their power, imposing their idea about how people should live and do their religion. But I don't think they really have a long-term policy to just house. They inherited a lot from the Republic, including a decent tax system that got a lot of weapons that were left by the end. But I don't think they've really thought through how do you get a stable Afghanistan? Because for almost all of Afghanistan's history, what's made it stable is outside resources. So the leaders of Afghanistan have always cultivated their relationships with the outside world. Even if Afghanistan appeared very insular, it's amazing that all of its rulers spent most of their time dealing with foreign relations, because that made the difference in terms of providing the resources, in terms of what you needed. And so foreign policy was actually an expertise of Afghan rulers. And one of the things that was lacking with Mullah Omar and the old Taliban, and is lacking in the new Taliban, is a belief that you don't need, foreign relations are nothing. If people don't want to give us money, that's no trouble. But governments don't survive crises after crises if their people lose faith in them. And it's particularly when the people who make up that government lose faith. One of the things we could see with Ashraf Ghani, why did his regime collapse so much? It's because people lost faith in him and his government. Even if the Americans had left, there was an army there, it was well funded, the Afghan state was well funded, but when they lost faith, it all collapsed. The Taliban has even fewer resources, but again, it's Afghan governments rarely fall because their opposition pulls them out. It's because they collapse from within and somebody else replaces them and takes credit for it. How that happens, why that happens, that's what we leave to historians, because they can actually say, oh, this happened. For those who want to predict the future, that's a game that is mostly a loser's game. We scholars explain why things had to happen once we've seen them happen. But I would say Afghanistan is in an unstable state, in part because the Taliban regime has been unable to fulfill basic governmental functions. And the question is, at what point are your own people going to say, we need more?
Brilliant. Thomas Barfield, as always, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you very much for doing part 2 for Fair Observer, and I'm sure we'll have a part 3 soon, because given how things are shaping in the region, I don't think the tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan are going away anywhere anytime soon.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.